And when I saw Everest that way, honestly, in that moment, I fell in love with Everest. That is the moment where I stood and promised myself, I am going to come back one day. I'm going to stand on top of this mountain. The very first thought that occurred in my mind once I stood on like that topmost point was, this is it, like I have achieved the biggest dream of my life. I realized that vegan diet was not a hindrance whatsoever from any angle. Not on the mountain at least. Dipti was there for my father, for me, all the time. Complete steadfast support through all of these things. Thank you is like a very small word for what she has done for my entire journey. She was climbing a much harder Everest than I was.
Welcome to AtACrossRoads. Today we have with us Kuntal Joisher, a mountaineer whose passion led him to scale mountains worldwide. He is the first vegan to summit Mount Everest, not once but twice, and he's a nutrition and fitness coach, dementia awareness advocate. Interestingly, Kuntal was a computer science professional in his earlier career. You must have said this so many times, but we would like to hear it again. You summited Mount Everest 2 times. How does it feel to be on the top of the world?
So I'm going to first start by making a small clarification before I go into how I felt on top of the world. You said that I'm the first vegan in the world to climb Everest, and that has to come with like an asterisk mark because we really don't know if I am the first vegan in the world to climb Mount Everest. Because truly speaking, there's no one sitting and tracking ये कौन सा डाइट खा रहा है, ये क्या खा रहा है, ये क्या पहन रहा है टॉप ऑफ द वर्ल्ड क्लाइम करने के लिए. So there's no one really, there's no body that is tracking this record. It is me who's, claiming that this is my record. I have gone and done my research trying to figure out, hey, are there any previous claims before, and if there are any other claims that yes, I have climbed Everest as a vegan, or I've done it in this style. I've gone and researched all of those, and I very, very strongly feel that I am the one who did it the first time, and that is why I'm making the claim. But if someone comes tomorrow and says, hey Kuntal, look, I went 10 years before you did and I really climbed it as a vegan, I'll be more than happy to say you were the first vegan in the world to climb Everest. Now coming to your question, how did I feel on top of the world? So I have been on top of the world twice now, once in 2016 and once in 2019. Once you reach above the Hillary step, there are these 3 snow humps that you have to cross before you can finally see the very top of Everest. So I remember pehla snow hump cross kiya, second snow hump cross kiya, and the excitement is like I'm like, my heart rate was like blasting, like dub 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 dub, and there's just so much like everything's coming and going, and then third hump cross kiya, like life ekdam slow motion mein ho gaya sab kuch, like all those thoughts zoop vanish, nothing. You can just see the top. You're standing here, and far in the distance on the summit, my Sherpa Mingma Tenji was standing, and he was like waving at me. He's like, oh wow. But one thing that I was very clear about is that upar jaake main rounga nahi, because I knew that most people end up crying on the top of Everest. It's also down to how I have trained myself mentally over the course of these years. And so I also told myself this story that I can't cry on top of Everest. But the moment I crossed the third hump, and the moment I saw Mingma, the very first thing that happened is, without me having any control over it, tears are just out of my eyes. And they're just flowing and flowing and flowing. And मैं बहुत रोकने की try कर रहा हूँ. I'm telling myself, no, I can't do this here. And then I just gave in. Because climbing to the top of Everest is not the end game. Getting back down safely is where the entire expedition comes to an end. But standing there, I knew that I had enough strength and enough endurance in me to be able to make it down safely very, very, very easily. So, wo tension nahi tha mere mind mein, which is why I perhaps also let go. The very first thought that occurred in my mind once I stood on like that topmost point was, fuck, I did it, man. Like, this is it. Like, I have achieved the biggest dream of my life. Once everything settled down, there was this immense gratitude for the mountain, for Mingma, for my wife, for my mother, for everyone who had a part to play in my journey that मैं इधर पहुंच गया हूँ. But I think mostly a lot for the mountain, that it allowed me to get to the top and experience, this slew of emotions and this crazy, ocean of whatever was happening in me at that point. I feel it was just immense gratitude, and then I just sat down, and I have to tell you, the view from top of the world is absolutely mind-boggling. Like, beyond imagination, awesome. So I sat down, and it was just kind of, taking time and just soaking in all of this awesome view that I was getting. And I think then I remember taking out a vegan flag and taking a photo with the vegan flag, and then making a phone call to my home. We had satellite phone. There are 2 minutes in the satellite phone. And then I am on top of the world. जितना आवाज था उतना मैंने निकाल दिया. And I think I could hear something where Dipti said, oh, like, I think she probably did 2 + 2 and said, okay, ये पहुंच गया शायद top पे, इसके लिए phone आ रहा है इसका इस time पे. Of course, over the course of next 2 days, the important thing for me at that point was to come back down. And I still remember the last steps I took out of the Khumbu icefall, where I detached myself from the last rope. And then in the distance, I could see my cook. His name is Nima Tamang. He's again another dear friend. And they all know that my biggest, I would say, weakness is a bottle of Coke on the mountain. मैंने मेरा बैग ऐसे उतारा, फेंका, क्रैम्पॉन्स भाड़ में गया, जो भी है, मैं ऐसे भाग रहा हूँ शाहरुख खान की तरह. And I went and I hugged him like really strong, and I knew his bag had the Coke for me. I opened his bag and removed the Coke, and everyone celebrated with a beer, but मेरे लिए वो मेरा Coke बहुत ये था. So that's how kind of the climb ended the first time.
So I was actually wondering how different it would be the second time.
Right. So second time के story पे आने वाला था. And so second time का story was, this was in 2019. And so I told Mingma, let's just be very focused this time. We get to the top as fast as we can. And then we get out, and then we get down. The climb was very important for me because I had set out myself to climb as a vegan. And in 2016, while I climbed the mountain as a vegan, I was still wearing a jacket that was made from the feathers of a dead animal. In 2016 climb, I made this one-time decision that I'm going to wear a suit made of dead animals, and I'm going to summit Everest. That also meant that for the first time in my life, I also ended up compromising with my ethics. And my ethics were centered around animal rights and around veganism. So that also put me in a deep hole mentally and emotionally after I came back from the climb, where I was very, very guilt-driven to a point where it took a lot of peace away from my life. So the goal was to replace that jacket with an animal-free jacket. And I'm not going to go into details, but I ended up creating that jacket with help of a Italian company and did those things. And in 2019, I was finally ready to wear that jacket and summit Everest. And so it was very important for me to make it to the top and make it back down in one piece without any issues. Because to me, this time my climb was entirely dedicated to the animals and entirely dedicated to the cause of veganism, and to show everyone that vegans can do it, and that I don't need to wear animals or I need to eat animals.
Being a computer science professional,
right,
you were happy with your job,
right,
you were doing good. How did this lead to climbing Mount Everest? How did it happen?
Right. So, as you said, I was a computer science engineer, and I did my master's in the US, got a job there, worked for about, I would say, 4.5 years in the US. And I wanted to move to India because in 2001, my dad was diagnosed with a disease called Dementia. my company said that we have made an acquisition of a company in Mumbai. And we would like you to go back to Mumbai and create your own team in Mumbai. I was like, great. It's almost like a win-win for everyone here. So I came back to Mumbai, started, like just in the regular day-to-day life, was taking care of my father, was building out a team here in Mumbai, and life took on. It's not like I wanted to climb Everest or anything. I was 110 kilos, unhealthy, obese. I didn't care about any of these things. I was happy in my life, the typical Gujarati guy, and I was happy. Life was very, very good. I had no complaints. I was making decent amount of money. And things were going nicely. I got married. 2 years of marriage passed by. Things were, nice and all. And then Dipti and I were sitting down and like thinking, okay, where can we go for a vacation? What can we do? And then we thought, oh, what have we not done? Like Dipti is like, I have never seen snow. I would like to see some snow. So we thought, okay, we'll go to Shimla and we'll go in the winters, like dead of winters. So this was February of 2009 and we landed in Shimla and we wanted to see snow. That is it. We had no other objective. About 80 kilometers on the old Hindustan-Tibet highway, we reached this place called Narkanda. Narkanda is, very like बहुत ही small village hai. So we started driving, and I think about half kilometer or 1 kilometer into the drive, there was so much snow. We went into snow and we enjoyed our time and we had like awesome time. We started walking and we started genuinely enjoying the walk. I was not prepared for this walk because I was wearing a t-shirt and a jeans and a slippers. And same Dipti also. We had just gone कि हम थोड़ा घूमेंगे, 1-2 snowball फेंकेंगे एक दूसरे के ऊपर और मजा करेंगे. यही करना है हमें, कुछ ज़्यादा नहीं करना है. 1.5 hours became 3 hours, became 3.5, 4. We had finished the 8-kilometer long trek and we were standing on the Hatumata temple. And we were alone for the entire 4 hours. This is the first time in my life when I have heard sounds and had thoughts and had emotions and felt things that I had never felt in 29 years of my existence, honestly speaking. When we got to the top, all of that, kind of just stopped happening. When I was standing on top of that mountain, the present was in extreme focus. The past and future had totally melted away. And I was able to feel some of those things. Like for example, the first thing, that heartbeat, I was standing there, Dipti khade ek dusre ke baaju mein, and my heart is like, doop, doop. And I'm looking at Dipti, can you hear this? And she's looking at me, are you mad or what? I felt this immense, deep joy and happiness. यार कभी लाइफ में इतना I had done something where I was miserable while getting to the top. मतलब फट के हाथ में आ गई. जिंदगी में कभी ट्रैक नहीं किया और 8 किलोमीटर का ट्रैक किया और I'm so miserable yet I'm feeling this deep happiness. I can't pinpoint why this is all happening to me or I'm feeling so alive. And it was just mind-boggling standing on the top. If you ask me one point of my life where I took the U-turn, it has to be this moment when I was standing in Shimla where my life just took a U-turn. I'm not saying I wanted to climb mountains. Okay, that is not what I'm saying. But this state of mind or state of being that I had achieved, I'm like, I want to feel like this for the rest of my life. Maybe it's just inherently I'm someone who's a very extreme person. If I do something and I like it, I want to go to the extreme levels of it. I can't take a middle ground. अरे थोड़ा ही enjoy करते, ज़्यादा enjoy करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. So I was standing on the top and my life changed. I'm like, I want to feel like this. But I came back home and I thought, okay, next day when I go to work, I will feel like this for my work. I didn't. I'll be very honest. I just did not feel that passion, that drive, or that stuff that I felt for when I felt on top of the mountains. So I said, maybe I should go back to the mountains again and see कि वापस होता है या नहीं ये. So I went back to the mountains again. I think 3-4 months later, I signed up for a small trip and went back to the mountains again. And I felt that way. I'm like, okay, maybe और एक बार जाता हूँ. और एक बार गया. Same feel हुआ. I'm like, maybe this is what I need to do more often. And I think that's where I started going on more and more and more trips, and I just started falling in love with the mountains like very, very deeply. And once you're in the world of mountains, at some point you'll think about Everest. Some point. And naturally I also started thinking about Everest. Not from a perspective that I want to climb Everest. I just thought it would be so cool if I could go walk to the Everest base camp and I, get to see the tallest mountain in the world up front. February 2009 was when I went to Shimla. And then October 2010 was when I was going to walk to Everest base camp. So we land in Kathmandu, take this short flight to Lukla. From there we walk for about 10 days through some of the most spectacular scenery I had seen. And as we were walking through these mountains, finally on 8th or 9th day, I think we reached the Everest base camp. And then I'm like, where is Everest? It's like the most anticlimactic thing that happens because you can't see Everest from Everest base camp. Here I am, this big dream of my life to see Everest, and I'm at Everest base camp and I can't see Everest. But luckily our team had set up this small detour to a place called Pumori base camp, which has an outstanding viewpoint or vantage point for Everest. Pumori is also this massive 7,000 meter mountain, which is called the daughter of Everest. It is bang diagonally opposite of Everest, and so we were camped at the base camp. So we were at the base camp of Pumori. कभी कभी अगर एवरेस्ट का पूरा रेंज देखा ना तो ऐसा लगा एवरेस्ट तो टॉलेस्ट माउंटेन है ही नहीं, इतना छोटा है यार बीच में, बाकी सब माउंटेन कितने बड़े दिख रहे हैं. So you almost feel as if Everest is not the tallest mountain when you see it from a certain vantage point, which was especially from Pumori base camp. But that was like 6:15, 6:30 in the evening, and the sunset had happened. Every mountain, anything that you look around was in the colors of blue, grey, black. मतलब सब dark हो रहा है. And then Everest in middle, that triangle face of Everest that you see, that is so famous face of Everest that you see, burning golden in color. Last rays of sunset were hitting on Everest, truly making it the top of the world. Like literally, sun last जाता है वहाँ, and disappears finally from there. And when I saw Everest that way, it's like someone had lit the entire mountain on fire. Just Everest. बाकी सब पहाड़, have faded away. And when I saw Everest that way, honestly, in that moment, I fell in love with Everest. That is the moment where I stood and promised myself, I am going to come back one day. I am going to stand on top of this mountain. As much impossible as it seems right now for me, I am going to come back one day and get to the top of this mountain. And all these limits that I had set for myself, that I was talking to you about, that हम ये नहीं कर सकते, हम ये नहीं कर सकते, I had decided that in that moment that I wanted to now go on a journey to break all those limits. Not only like people say, think outside the box or go outside the box or go outside your comfort zone. I'm like, यहाँ कोई box नहीं है, यहाँ कुछ exist नहीं करता. I have to go to places where I have never even dreamt of in my wildest dreams. So that's the journey that kickstarted in October of 2010, and that's the journey I have been on till now. Been 13 years now almost.
Coming to the journey, when you decided summiting Mount Everest, obviously there must have been tremendous training,
right?
A lot of things. Then you finally reach the base camp, and you come to know the season getting called off.
Right.
And you're back home.
Right.
Then you go again, maybe next year or a couple of years back?
Next year.
Next year, okay. Next year you go back. So again, training and everything and reaching the base camp again.
Right.
And again, the season gets called off. So you plan to summit Mount Everest and you go through so much of training, and 2 consecutive years after reaching the base camp, you come to know it, the season getting called off. I don't think so many of us could actually think of really doing it for the 3rd time or even attempting.
Right.
Attempting the 3rd time.
Right.
Were you ever at like some kind of a crossroads that maybe it's not meant for me, I don't want to do it? And what are the thoughts coming at that point after the second time when you were coming back from the base camp,
Right.
not able to do your expedition.
Right. So second time when the expedition was called off, it was called off due to a massive earthquake. A massive earthquake that induced a massive avalanche. Think of this avalanche as like an infinite tsunami of snow and ice. It's like from the left of the sky to the right of the sky, the entire sky, limitlessly, everywhere, was just filled with snow, ice, boulders, debris, flying pressure cookers, flying tent poles, everything that avalanche could muster and build and throw at us. That's how massive that avalanche was. When I was standing there and when I looked at the avalanche, it was less than 3 seconds away from us. In that moment, I didn't think that I was going to die. I was actually very certain that I was going to die. So, to be able to be sitting here alive 8 years later is honestly just a miracle. I think one of the most common emotions at that point was, shit yaar, mar gaya abhi main. Like, मरना नहीं है यार, मरना नहीं है यार, इतना जल्दी नहीं यार, कुछ किया ही नहीं है लाइफ में यार, जो सबसे बड़ा ड्रीम है वो ड्रीम ही नहीं, शुरू भी नहीं हुआ यार, अभी मैं मर जाऊंगा. I think some of my realizations that night were, यार, I am lucky. एक 50 फीट दूर 5 लोग मर गए, which means that if मेरा कैंप साइट 50 फीट दूर होता उस दिन, तो मैं अभी बैठ के आपके साथ बात नहीं कर रहा होता. So that dawned on me like right away. I am lucky. And then the second thing that came to my mind was, yeah, if now on, given that now all the life is bonus and I don't know when it will go away, any dreams and passions that I have in life, I have to chase them now. Not 10 years later, not when I'm 60, not when I have all the money in the world, not this, that, nothing. The right time is now. Because I have no idea next moment zinda hu ya nahi hu. So those were some of the thoughts that I had sleeping that night in that tent, thinking through, all my life and what had happened till then. So when I came home after the cancelled expedition, there were a lot of things, right? Many people told, मत जा, क्या हर टाइम जाके पैसा बर्बाद कर रहा है, और some people said you just don't have what it takes. सब गुजराती लोग में इतना हम नहीं करते हैं. 2009 2010 when I had announced that I'm going to climb Everest, so many said पागल हो गया है तू, ये सब हम नहीं करते हैं, ये क्या है, तू बिजनेस कर. I am not someone who followed norms that were set or that were expected from a lot of us, which is why when I decided to go the Everest route, there was a whole host of क्या कर रहा है, you are going to give away your life, you are going to give away your career. Think about this, 10 years down the line क्या होगा, 20 years down the line. I'm like, मैं नहीं सोचने वाला 20 years down the line. उसके लिए मैं अभी अपना present नहीं waste करने वाला. That was literally the first thing that attracted me to the mountains, was living in the present. So, kind of, all those people were saying things. Honestly, I was not listening to them at all. Not in 2009, not in 2010, not in 2016, not today. I'm not saying I don't listen to constructive criticism or constructive feedback. That is something that have made a nice filter where I can, filter out what I really need to filter out about. But at the end of the day, I also knew in the deepest part of my heart that this is my dream, that this is my baby. If I give up, then मेरा ही dream जाने वाला है, लोगों का dream नहीं जाने वाला. I am going to go back and I am going to climb Everest. Third time, next year itself. But I also sat down with Dipti and told her that let's say if I'm getting down the plane and my ankle twists and I have to come home, that will be the last time I will try climbing Everest. At least for foreseeable future. Because I had given everything I had to climb Everest. I had done crazy levels of training. I had spent too much time, too much money, too much mind space, too much emotional space, too much everything. I had given more than 500% to Everest. And if it didn't happen in the third year, maybe it was not supposed to happen or meant to happen or whatever. But I would have stopped for a while at least. That is, something that I was very clear in my mind. It's not the end of the world. ऐसे नहीं है कि Everest ही last mountain है दुनिया का. बहुत सारे mountain हैं. I would have maybe moved on and done something else. And maybe come to Everest maybe later on in life. I don't know. And I think the crucial thing that I always have had during these 13 years, or I think throughout my entire life, is that if there is someone that I need to back, I have to back myself.
You follow a very different lifestyle when it comes to diet.
Right.
You've been a vegan almost all throughout your life.
Right.
20 plus years.
Right.
How does it affect in your training, endurance,
right,
and preparation and all that? Your thoughts on your vegan lifestyle?
Right. So I have been a vegan for the last 21 years, as you pointed out. And I still remember that 2010 में when I came back home, Everest चढ़ना है. So like any smart person, I went on Google and typed climbing Everest as a vegan. कभी जिंदगी में ऐसा हुआ है कि गूगल पे कुछ टाइप किया है और 0 रिजल्ट्स आया हो? हुआ ऐसा? नहीं होता है, जनरली नहीं होता है. कि कुछ भी स्पेलिंग मिस्टेक भी किया तो भी गूगल रिजल्ट्स देता है. मेरे साथ आ गया 0 रिजल्ट्स और एटलीस्ट नो सेम्बलेंस ऑफ एनी गुड रिजल्ट्स विच काइंड ऑफ पॉइंटेड मी. और मुझे समझ गया कि अभी तक कोई एटलीस्ट डॉक्यूमेंटेड वीगन नहीं है जिसने एवरेस्ट किया है, एंड दैट आई हैव नो प्रेसिडेंट टू फॉलो और लर्न फ्रॉम. सो देन आई ऑल्सो स्टार्टेड कम्युनिकेटिंग विद अ लॉट ऑफ एजेंसीज के मुझे एवरेस्ट चढ़ना है और एज अ वीगन चढ़ना है. सो लॉट ऑफ एजेंसीज स्टार्टेड गेटिंग बैक टू मी एंड सेइंग कि पॉसिबल नहीं है. मीट खाना ज़रूरी है, एग्स खाना ज़रूरी है, दूध पीना ज़रूरी है, चीज़ खाना ज़रूरी है, होल होस्ट ऑफ और सारी चीज़ें खाना ज़रूरी है. नॉट ओनली टू ट्रेन एंड बिल्ड द फिटनेस रिक्वायर्ड टू क्लाइम एवरेस्ट, बट ऑल्सो जब भी आप एवरेस्ट पे आओगे तभी वही सारा खाना यूज़ करके एनर्जी जनरेट करने के लिए, वार्मथ जनरेट करने के लिए, और 60-70 डेज जो एवरेस्ट एक्सपीडिशन को लगते हैं उतने दिन टिकने के लिए ये सब ज़रूरी है. इन एडिशन, हाउ आर यू गोइंग टू मैनेज योर गेयर? लेदर पहनना ज़रूरी है, वुल पहनना ज़रूरी है, फेदर के जैकेट्स पहनना ज़रूरी है, तो उसका क्या करोगे? सो आई वॉज लाइक, इन माई माइंड आई वॉज वेरी क्लियर, if I am going to do Everest, I am going to do it as a vegan, or I am not going to do it at all. So I said, let's start off by doing a small climb first. पहले हम small climb से शुरू करेंगे, देखेंगे सब कैसा जाता है उस climb में, and then I can kind of think about next steps. And I remember when I summited Stoke Kangri and I came down and I reflected back on the climb, I realized that vegan diet was not a hindrance whatsoever from any angle. Not on the mountain at least. While my training, I still had to figure out some certain amount of things because I was still struggling with my training bit in terms of getting really peak performance from my training. But even that didn't have anything to do with vegan diet itself, क्योंकि मैं थोड़ा बहुत जंक खाता था और सोचे बिना खाता था और वैसा सब खाना खा रहा था. So as soon as I started making and setting up my diet and did a little bit more planning, did a little bit more research and set it up in a way that it was providing my body enough nourishment. And vegan diet में there are things like vitamin B12 या vitamin D3 इतना easily नहीं मिल सकता है मुझे diet में, तो I started supplementing those. एक बार वो भी किया तो मेरा ट्रेनिंग भी quite significantly level तक improve हो गया जितना डाइट के पोर्शन से improve हो सकता है. So in last 13-14 years that I've gone and built a different level of fitness and gone and climbed so many mountains across the world and done everything that I had to, if I can reflect back upon and list out the top 100 challenges, I would say vegan diet was not even the 101st challenge on that list. I still remember 2013 में I was sponsored by my company to climb Everest in 2014. एंड मेरी कंपनी ने बोला कि हम आप पे एक छोटा डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाएंगे बिकॉज वी वांट टू यूज दैट एज अ मार्केटिंग मटेरियल. तो थ्रू ऑल ऑफ दोज थिंग्स वी हैड सेट अप अ वेरी स्मॉल इंटरव्यू ऑफ मी एंड अरुणिमा सिन्हा. अरुणिमा सिन्हा इज द फर्स्ट फीमेल एम्प्यूटी ऑफ द वर्ल्ड टू क्लाइम माउंट एवरेस्ट. वो दिल्ली से लखनऊ ट्रेन में जा रही थी और किसी रॉबर ने उसका चेन खींचने का ट्राई किया. वो खींचा खींची में वो ट्रेन से गिर गई और दूसरे साइड के पटरी पे गिर गई और एक ट्रेन ने आके उसके एक पैर को पूरा काट दिया. सामने से एक ट्रेन आ रही थी उसने. फिर एज शी गॉट अ लिटिल बेटर द डॉक्टर टोल्ड हर दैट इट विल टेक यू एटलीस्ट 2 years टू जस्ट लर्न हाउ टू वॉक. 15 months later she was standing on the summit of Mount Everest. So when I was doing an interview with her and I was talking to her about some of my challenges, अरुणिमा सिन्हा ने मुझे बोला था, कुंतल करना है तो करना है, वरना बहाने तो 1000 होंगे ही होंगे हमेशा. So when she said that, it hit me really hard, and And I have realized after that point that any time I have tried taking a shortcut or tried saying कि यार ये नहीं हो सकता है यार, ये impossible है यार, ये अभी ऐसी सारी स्टोरी अगर मैंने अपने आप को बोलने की ट्राई की है ना, ऑलवेज रिमेंबर अरुणिमा. आई एम लाइक यार उसका एक पैर कटा हुआ था, कटे हुए पैर के साथ वो अगर एवरेस्ट पे पहुंच गया और वो बोल रही है कि बहाने मत बनाओ. यार मैं तो पूरा एबल बॉडीड बंदा हूँ, मैं क्यों अपने आप को इम्पॉसिबल वाली स्टोरी सुनाने की ट्राई कर रहा हूँ, किस रीजन से. सो ऑनेस्टली थ्रू द जर्नी वीगन डाइट हैज नॉट बीन अ प्रॉब्लम. वीगन gear was a little bit of a challenge, but not something that could not have been surmounted. And so that's my take on veganism. I am a vegan for the animals. And 2019 में जब मैं summit पे था, I had a vegan flag in me. And while the summit was very emotionless, I think one emotion that was there in the deepest part was no animal had to suffer or die for my Everest 2019 dream to come true.
Being it veganism or your passion for mountaineering, scaling up mountains across the world, family plays a very important role as a backbone, as a support.
Right.
I mean, Dipti, your wife, there is a huge contribution.
Right.
How does the support of family work for your, because even veganism is a little extreme as a diet.
Right.
You're not like one end of the spectrum.
Right.
And mountaineering is also more like a professional sports. It's no less than that.
Right.
In both conditions, how does her role play, and how does it happen at home?
Right. So I still remember when I came back from that 2010 trip and I told Dipti that I'm going to climb Everest, and she was a little taken aback and she had herself been a little frustrated that which direction I'm taking, what is it that I'm doing in life. क्योंकि जब भी हमारा शादी हुआ मैं तभी तो सॉफ्टवेयर इंजीनियर था, and she thought that, and we have an arranged marriage match. ऐसा भी नहीं कि we were in love or something and we got married and then sure someone takes a different direction in life, the partner would support. यहाँ तो प्रॉपर अरेंज मैरिज मैच था, शादी हुई एंड लाइफ वॉज गुड, पैसे भी कमा रहा हूँ रेगुलर, जैसे सब लोगों की लाइफ है वैसी ही लाइफ चल रही थी until I decided to climb mountains. And then I was away for significant durations climbing mountains. Yes, the away piece mattered to her because mountains were starting to take away or chip away the time that both of us could have spent together building our relationship, which was in its nascent stage earlier on in the journey, but also that I was at constant risk, not of like losing fingers or toes or breaking bones, of dying as well. So both of those things were significantly playing on her mind, even my mother's mind, and everyone's mind, especially people who cared about me. But as I said, I am someone who is an extreme person. So when I fell in love with Everest, everything else kind of faded away. Like that sunset, everything else unfortunately faded away in that sunset, and just Everest stayed in that glory of the sunset. And when I announced, it was quite hard for them. They were not able to cope up initially, and even I was not able to cope up initially quite a bit because of the friction that Everest brought into the picture, where they didn't want me to go and I couldn't think of a life without it. To me, I wouldn't say Dipti didn't matter or my mother didn't matter or my father didn't matter, but they didn't matter as much as Everest did. And I'm going to be honest here, right? Mountaineers to a certain degree are extremely self-centered and selfish people, and I am one. There's just no two ways about it. My dream became everything. Everything else became nothing at that point, unfortunately. So, उस time में there was a whole host of friction, but I think there was a point where we sat down and we discussed about this, and I said, I'm going to do this. But over the course of years, I also ensured that I demonstrated to them that I am a very, very strong and a safe climber. That I'm doing enough, that I'm preparing well, that I'm training well, that I'm building the skills, I'm building the experience, I'm doing everything it takes to stay safe on the mountain. That is the least I owed to them. But that was still not the part of the picture, right? One was the safety, but one was also the time that Everest was chipping away. At one point it was 4 months, sometimes 4.5 months a year that I was not with my family, I was with the mountains most of the time. So ये सारी चीज़ें हो रही थी, and during that time my dad had also lost pretty much all his independence, so he was bedridden. He had to be taken care of round the clock. You have to bathe him, you have to clean him, you have to do everything, you have to feed him, you have to put him to sleep. For Dipti, I'm going to be like, look, we can think in traditional sense, oh, he, she, I, मेरे डैड को अपना डैड माना और वो सब बोलने के लिए सब अच्छा है. बट इन प्रैक्टिकल एस्पेक्ट वो मेरे घर पे आई है. ही इज नॉट, माई डैड इज नॉट दीप्ति's dad at the end of the day. He's my dad. But in the last 10 years of my dad's life, Dipti literally treated my dad like Reva. Or I would even say more than Reva. And Reva is to her own. Whereas my dad was to my dad. And Dipti treated literally my dad like how she took care of Reva in first year of her birth. So it was her son for those 10 years. And that's how she took care of my dad every single day. She didn't have to, but she did. And this is the kind of support that allowed me to stay hyper focused when I was on the mountain. Because from day one, Dipti, for him it was, he's my son. And once वो emotion आ गया, I knew that I never even had to ask. It's almost like she's taking care of my dad more than I could. For me, it was important to just stay very focused and not have any distractions, which would allow me to stay very focused on the mountain and stay very safe on the mountain as well. So that is how 3 years went by. 2014, 2015, 2016. And as time passes by, things just get more extreme and extreme and extreme. There's never going to be in the opposite direction. To the point where in 2016, barely there was any relationship at all. And yet Dipti was there for my father, for me, all the time. Complete steadfast support through all of these things. And I'm not going to sit here and thank or anything, right? Because thank you is like a very small word for what she has done for my entire journey. She was climbing a much harder Everest than I was. So I would say through all of this, we have gone through our ups and downs, and she has been there always. She has been there supporting me through all of this. And as I said, she climbed a much harder Everest than I did. Could I have done this? If the roles were exchanged? I don't think so. I think it would have been hard. But yeah, that's the kind of support I feel. I think families kind of, I can't even say in words, what she has done for me through the last 10 years, and just being around and being supporting and fighting her battles without having any support from my side. So yeah, that's the support that I've gotten, which has put me on top of Everest.
Significant support, I must say that. Now, also the lifestyle, like vegan, your entire family is a vegan. Does it become a challenge to go into family functions or visit somewhere because of your vegan diet? And how do you ensure, like, your daughter is very young, and
right,
if she goes for a birthday party or something
right,
like that, so how do you manage this?
Right, so I have been a vegan for 21 years, and through the earlier part of our marriage, I never told Dipti to be a vegan. She had certain health problems around her skin and everything, where she tried multiple solutions to that problem, and nothing worked out for her. So I suggested to her, why don't you try going vegan? Maybe that may help, may not. Try for 6 months. If it doesn't help, chuck, do something else. She tried it and it worked for her, and over the course of last few years, she has also made connection with animal rights movement to a point where when we got pregnant, she was like, I want to do a vegan pregnancy entirely. And I was like, you have to do the pregnancy. So I'm not going to stand here and say you have to do a vegan pregnancy. You can decide what you want. If you want to do vegan pregnancy, I'm here to help you, support you, and ensure that your diet and everything is on point to take care of you. So we did the vegan pregnancy, and now our daughter is 3.5 years old, a little more than 3.5 years old. And honestly, now vegan word itself is so popular everywhere, or more than popular, many more people are now aware of it, or aware of what the concept is, or aware of what vegan means, and are also quite a bit accepting of that. In the sense, if I tell someone that I'm a vegan and that please make this food for me, they are very, very open to that. Not like 20 years ago, thoda ghee dala to kya ho jayega, एक पीस पनीर का होगा तो क्या हो जाएगा, खा लेना, क्या प्रॉब्लम है, थोड़ा बटर डाल दिया ब्रेड में तो क्या हो जाएगा, कुछ नहीं, थोड़ा ही है, ज़्यादा नहीं है. इट्स लाइक मी टर्निंग अराउंड एंड सेइंग यार तुम्हारे दाल में मैंने एक पीस चिकन डाल दिया है, प्रॉब्लम है तुमको, तुम तो वेजिटेरियन, खा ले, एक ही चिकन है, क्या हो जाएगा, राइट. सो व्हेन यू आर टेलिंग अ वीगन कि एक ही पनीर है, खा लो ना, क्या हो जाएगा, यू आर टेलिंग मी द सेम थिंग टू मी. एटलीस्ट I don't consider difference between a piece of paneer and a piece of chicken. They both are same. They are coming from a dead animal. You are, discriminating because of your own cognitive dissonance. I am not going to discriminate because, मेरा cognitive dissonance नहीं है वहाँ. So, उस sense में, nowadays I think people are a lot better. Like for example, in her school, we clearly told her that, look, she's a vegan and that she doesn't eat milk products and that she doesn't eat dairy products. Then the school were okay. They're like, okay, we'll not take snack fees from you. You can, provide tiffin to her. Or like Breva is now going to a birthday party this evening. And so the mother called Dipti and asked her that what will you eat, and I really want to ensure that you guys eat something. Tell me what I can make for you. And so Dipti asked what the menu is. And she said the menu, and she asked that what will you put in this sabzi, how will you make this, and she said that this all will be made like this. So she said by default vegan, right? The menu is chole puri. So she's asked कि chole में क्या डालोगे, पूरी में क्या डालोगे, and by default it was vegan. So you didn't have to change anything. But for the safer side, we are going to make some pasta, and we'll take it along with us. So in case if Reva doesn't eat that or doesn't like it, then at least she has some fallback option. Right now, Reva is 3.5. So I can, control what she eats. At some point, she will be an individual of her own. And at that point, she will have the choice to eat whatever she wants. We as parents will guide her about what veganism is, why we are vegans, why we don't eat animals, why we don't drink animals, why we don't harm animals, why is that important to us. And if at some point she also identifies with that, great. If doesn't, then I can't do much, right? I'm not going to sit here and try and control what she eats or what she doesn't eat, because then, that also leads to a whole host of friction and all of those things. Again, I'm saying this right now, right? I have no idea what's going to happen 5 years down the line. So I'm not going to think about that.
So it has been an extraordinary journey. And you always mentioned that you kind of live in the present, and things are very different now, family-wise. Reva, your daughter, is 3.5,
right?
More than 3.5 year old now, and so any future, any planning for, because leaving Reva for quite long duration of months would be more difficult now. So any mountain scaling, any summits planned in something like that, near future?
Right. So now that Reva is into picture, things are slightly different because I'm also now a little bit more future thinking. If it was just me and Dipti, it's just two of us, and it's just a little bit, relaxed life, and we don't have to think. It's not like I have to go to school or I have to do, things like that. Both of us, could be like really have a lot more flexibility. But now with Reva into picture, now I have to think about Reva's school. I have to think about Reva's future, about her, everything, right? So as a nutrition and a fitness coach, I also have to professionally set up myself and start making money and start doing all of those things. Same with Dipti. Dipti also now has to go into this direction, and she has to start setting up her career and start going in this direction. We are going to do enough that that Reva's future is reasonably secured. I'm not going to send her to the best school on the planet, to the best college on the planet, to best this on the planet, give her the best of everything. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do enough because I also want her to see that I'm not going to give up my dreams and give up my life for her. As I grow up, I want to see that my dad and my mom also have a life of their own. They are individuals, they have their passions, they have their dreams, they are following those dreams. That is the only way I'm going to be able to convince her to do the same. Because otherwise she is going to be in the same cycle that my parents were, that I will get caught in and that she will also get caught in. Because she will think, यही जिंदगी है कि हम सबको पागल की तरह काम करना है, पागल की तरह पैसा कमाना है और कोई ड्रीम्स और कोई ये नहीं है लाइफ में. I want to show her that yes, you can make okayish amount of money, have a decent life. वो रह के भी तुम एक अच्छी पैशन और वो सब फॉलो कर सकते हो और उसके बीच में एक बैलेंस लेके आ सकते हो. सो मैं अभी तक तो ना बोल रहा था बैलेंस मत लेके आओ जिंदगी में, बट आई थिंक इस चीज में मुझे लग रहा है बैलेंस लेके आना बहुत जरूरी है. बिकॉज आई फील टू मेनी पीपल आर इनटू लाइक पागल की तरह पैसा कमाओ और वीकेंड में एक ट्रिप करके आओ, वो पैशन है. टू ईच देयर ओन. आपको ये करना है तो आप ये करो, बट आई फील कि दूसरी वे भी है लाइफ में वेयर यू ट्रूली ऑनेस्टली स्केल बैक ऑन योर नीड्स. यू डोंट हैव टू लिव अ क्रेजी लग्जरी लाइफ. यू कैन लीड अ मॉडरेट बेसिक लाइफ जहां सारी बेसिक नेसेसिटीज पूरी हो रही है और बाकी अब ताकि तुम अपने आप को पागल की तरह मार नहीं रहे हो कि वही एक लाइफस्टाइल को तुम सस्टेन कर सको. So I feel that is the balance now, Dipti, and that's the journey that Dipti and I are on now. And this also means that there's not much time to think about what next mountain I want to climb. Because a mountain climbing expedition is also a very expensive endeavor. So I don't want to put in a whole host of money or try and find out sponsors or try and work and make so much money that I can go and climb mountains right now. I don't need that stress right now in my life. I'm happy climbing in the weekends or in the weekdays, just small mountains in the Sahyadri. That also makes me as happy as a Himalayan summit does. I don't discriminate between mountains कि ये mountain ज़्यादा अच्छा है, ये mountain और ज़्यादा अच्छा है, कुछ नहीं. Mountain है, मुझे वहाँ मज़ा आता है. So for now there are no plans as such in near future. I continue my other passion these days is bodybuilding. So I continue dedicating a little bit of time to that, but more and more time in the next few years we will spend on setting up our careers again, because I gave up on my career for the last 13 years. So now I have to almost start from scratch. I'm starting from zero. I'm literally making less money than I made as a student programmer in 2001. So there's an uphill battle here where I have to get back to some sense of financial security and stability and consistency as well. So that is a challenge that both Dipti and I are going to look at as a little bit more priority in the coming few years. Right now, no fixed plans. Right now, priorities have shifted a little bit. Mountaineering is always going to be an integral part of my life. I'm going to continue climbing tons and tons of mountains. They'll be small, but that will be an integral part of the rest of my life. So yeah, that's the future plans.
It's such an amazing conversation. I mean, there were so many takeaways. Thank you so much, Kuntal, for being on our show, and wish you all the best and the entire family.
Thank you
for the future.
Thank you so much.